Welcome to The Practical Intuitive, where each Monday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern, where host Robin Fritz explores mind, body, and spirit for the real world. Because we are all intuitives and healers, and we must all learn to love ourselves and live that love every day. Robin is a trained and certified intuitive and spiritual consultant and hypnotherapist with an international practice based in Seattle, Washington. As the Practical Intuitive, she covers personal and business intuition, animal communication, mediumship, space clearing, past life regression, shamanic insights, energy healing, soul choice. It's all here. Readings, healings, and funny, warm, thought-provoking conversations. It's Robin Fritz, the Practical Intuitive, helping you mastermind body and spirit for the real world. No ifs, ands, buts, or BS ever.
Welcome to the Practical Intuitive, Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robin Fritz. We're live here in Seattle, Washington, and today is October 29th, 2018. And I thought, well, we're getting ready for Halloween in the United States, and I got to thinking about all the things that turn up when I do a space clearing for clients. And so the question today is, when ghosts haunt our homes, or do they? So I'm going to talk about a very particular space clearing I did and how we discovered that ghosts might not always be ghosts. But before we get into today's show, I would like to remind you that I'm here every week with different things, with subjects that help you understand that we are all intuitives and healers. We all just need to learn how to tap those skills, and that I'm here to help you do that in your own life to make your home and your business life be more successful, more relaxed. And you are also welcome to call into the show with questions, with comments, to share your own weird pre-Halloween story, or to get a quick intuitive reading. You can call 202-570-7057. And if you're shy, you are welcome to email me at my website, robinfritz.com, ROBYNFRITZ.com. or connect with me on Facebook at the Practical Intuitive Robin M. Fritz. So this week, again, we're going to talk about when ghosts haunt our homes, or do they? And while we think about what we think about ghosts, what they are, what else is out there in the environment that we are dealing with every day, even if we don't know it. But first, every week, I want to start with helping you tap into the energy of the crystal Fallon. Fallon is a citrine Lemurian quartz, a rare power crystal, an ancient healer and truth bringer. And you can connect with him during the show based on how your intuition works most strongly. So you may see pictures, feel his energy, hear him chat with you, or just know that you're connected with him. And at the end of the show, we'll close you back down so you're ready to go about your day. So taking your attention to the top of your head, imagine you're connecting with Fallon. And as you breathe down from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, just feel the blocks and the cares of the day washing away, clearing out, so that you have this time for yourself and with this community that OMTimes has created for us. So breathing down from the top of your head, down your face, your shoulders, your chest, your hips, your knees, and your feet. The top of your head to the bottom of your feet. And now reversing that energy line, going back up, you can invite the healing energy of Fallon to join with you if you'd like, or imagine a gold light going to your heart, and with each beat of your heart, filling your body with healthy, positive energy. So breathing up from your feet, past your knees, your hips, your chest, your shoulders, your face, and the top of your head. So today's subject is talking about what kinds of things get into our homes and even uninhabited wild spaces, the various entities that can be out there, including bad vibes from our neighbors and our own emotional issues. And I'll tap very briefly into that. Then I want to launch into this fairly complex story that I have about a space clearing that'll give you some new ideas of what's out there in the environment. But first of all, there is really more going on in the world than any of us really realize. And most of it is because we can't actually see things that are out there in the environment. So depending on where you live, you may live in a place that has some kind of disturbed energies. Now, of course, we'll get that in places where terrible things have happened. You know, you hear about the old haunted house because a murder was committed there. But here in Seattle, which is on the scale of things a fairly new city, if you're thinking about comparing it to, say, cities in India or China or Europe, for example. Seattle is a very young city. But we have a very active open portal type environment, meaning that portals are essentially doorways to different dimensions, so to speak. And that can create entry and exit for different beings from different dimensions. And I ran into some of these in a space clearing I did in a different part of Seattle some years ago, where young children were involved, seeing and hearing things, which turned out to be dead people. But in addition, there were these little black entities popping up from the ground. And I'm looking at that going, I have no idea what that is. And because I work with non-humans, especially humans from different dimensions, which is just one of the things I signed up for in life, and yes, nobody pays me for that, I went to them and said, hey, you know, there are little children involved here. And I think there's one universal, well, I'm sure there's more than one, but one main universal truth in the universe is that all beings will come together to take care of children. So as soon as I said there are children involved, these beings stepped forward and looked at the property with me, and they said, oh yeah, those things live on the land. They pop up and out of different dimensions through the portals, and how come you don't know about that? And I said, well, because I don't. Other humans may, but I don't. And it was an everyday thing for them. So when you think about it, to find that there are other beings in the world that we don't see, that we can communicate with, and that know more about the things that are going on around us, doesn't it give you pause to wonder how much we're actually missing in the world? So that's one thing that I wanted to share with you. And at the end, I want to wrap up and talk about how you can keep your spaces as clear as possible to kind of prevent intrusions from other dimensions or just from things that are wandering out around outside. And that can be a multi-part show for sure. But let me tell you about an old space clearing that I did way back in 2011. And I call it the story of Martha in the haunted home in California. I had a friend in California who, like me, lives with Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, a very wonderful little breed of dog, 20-pound toy breed. And they're lap dogs, basically. And so that's how we met. And she was living in California at the time and had lived in the same little cabin several times over a course of several years. And this was a little cabin that high in the mountains of California, built around the time when they were mining that area. So it was at least 100 years old, just a tiny little 400 square foot cabin that miners would live in, or their families would live in while they were working in the mines. So she was living in this house, which is 100 years old, and she was having problems. She was seeing a ghost. She was seeing a woman who appeared to be dressed like women in the 1930s and 40s. So her intuitive power, she can hear, but she can also see very clearly. So she saw this woman dressed in 1930s and 1940s clothes, and this woman had one thing on her mind. She kept telling Jody that this is my house, you get out of my house. And Jody and I did several space clearings together. I gave her directions on how to do it. Fallon and I would join in. We asked her guides to help keep this ghost out. But now they worked for very long, and the situation was getting scary, at least to me. I mean, Jody was, well, my friend, let's just say my friend, was starting to feel this ghost run her hand down her arm. Yikes, right? And kept insisting that this is my house. She kept stomping around at night or even during the day. She'd flip the covers back. You know, this was just a very annoyed and annoying ghost. And it was time to do some ghost busting, right? So you sit down in a situation, you're clearing a house, whether you feel like there's something stuck in the energy of that house, or you're just clearing because you're remodeling, you're buying a new place, or I tell people, clear your house once a month when you pay bills, but certainly after an illness or a death, or even to celebrate something, right? So we're clearing this house again with an intention to just sit down and talk to this ghost and tell her what's going on. So down and we called in this woman, and by now we knew her name was Martha. At least that's the name that she used to use. And so I started talking with her, and she was talking back, and she's saying, "You're ghosts. Get out of my house. You're two ghosts in my house." And I'm like, no, we're not ghosts. And I told her we were human women, and we weren't the ghost, and she was. I said, "This isn't your house anymore, Martha. You want to talk about that with us?" And, you know, she was afraid. I mean, she's looking at two women who she thought were ghosts that looked ghostly to her, you know, kind of transparent. We were looking at what we thought was a ghost, and nobody was agreeing on what was what. So my job then was to try to calm Martha down so that she could have a conversation with us. And it also occurred to me that if she was Christian, she might be worrying that we were some form of the devil. So I said, "Martha, don't know quite what's going on, but we are not ghosts, and we're not the devil. We're not angels. We're not bad guys of any kind. That we're human. Two ordinary human women, just like she was. Except, of course, we were still thinking she was a ghost." She says, no, I don't believe it. I said, "No, we're just two women sitting down having a conversation with you." So, I mean, what would you be in this kind of a conversation? A ghost is claiming that we're ghosts. We're claiming that she's a ghost. And somewhere in there, somebody's right and somebody's wrong. We didn't know what. So I finally thought, wait, I've got an idea about what could be going on here. And, you know, sometimes my ideas drive me crazy and my friends and even sometimes clients, because I have like, wait, what about this? You know, but I usually appreciate my sense of curiosity, my sense of calm in a situation. It's like, okay, let's reason through this situation. Let's figure out what's going on here. So I thought, I wonder if sci-fi just came to life and we're talking to a time traveler. And the reasons I had been thinking that, that occurred to me several times. This was a ghost who was actually touching someone, physically touching someone, seeing someone, telling them they were in her house, and they weren't. So what could be happening? We were somehow crossing time boundaries here. So I said, "Martha, we're talking to you, and the date here where we are is July 22nd, 2011. "No, it's not," she said. And I know that my friend and I had tried several times over the past few months to tell her what the date was, and she just did not believe us. And I said, "Yes, it is. I'm talking to you from Seattle, Washington, and my friend is talking to you from the house that you say is yours." Well, then Martha goes really quiet, right? And I could almost feel her thinking, or, you know, but I could definitely sense astonishment and disbelief and like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And but I could also tell that she was starting to kind of believe me. I mean, here were three women talking, right? And she said, finally, she says, I don't understand. How can that be? How can it be 2011? And I said, well, I don't know. There's scientists who study things. They don't know the answer. I just know that we can talk with you. And we're two plain ordinary women living in 2011. And somehow we are able to talk with you. So, things have changed. There are big cities now here in the United States. If, you're in that little cabin there in California where my friend is now in our time period, I said, that's something we have to figure out. But tell me, what year is it where you are? So I heard her say 1945, and my friend heard her say 1947. So close enough, right? It's just really hard not to get excited when you're suddenly talking to somebody who says they're in a different year than you are. And you're very clearly seeing and chatting with them. And I was like, oh my gosh, So we started talking with her very quietly. My friend and I both told her the year that we were born, which was later than that, later than 1940s. And she calmed down and she just started talking with us. And we were figuring that, if she was in the 40s and she felt older to us and looked older to us as she was presenting, that we were never going to meet her in real life, not in 2011. So we started talking about how we would like to meet her and that we couldn't. And I know we're running into a break here. We will talk more about what happened with Martha after the break.
Conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Hi, this is New Age Grammy winner Paul Avgerinos. Thanks for listening to OMTimes Radio, and please support my peaceful healing music with a purchase at iTunes, Amazon, or wherever you shop for fine music. Just put my name into the search engine, Paul Avgerinos. A, V like Victor, G like George, E-R-I-N-O-S. You can also visit me at roundskymusic.com. Thanks for listening, and I'm wishing you the brightest of blessings.
In the wake of a disaster, what one thing can you send that will help people the most? A blanket, a tent, a sandbag, a doctor. Actually, if you send a monetary donation, you send all these things. Even a small donation can make a big impact and can quickly become exactly what people affected by disaster need most.
In the wake of a hurricane, your monetary donation can make a huge difference to those in need. To donate, visit supporthurricanerelief.org. That's supporthurricanerelief.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Practical Intuitive Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robin Fritz. I'm broadcasting from Seattle, Washington, and today's subject is ghosts, meeting ghosts. Are they ghosts in our homes? And if they're not, what are they? So I was telling the story of meeting Martha in a cabin in the California woods, and it was 2011. My friend and I were trying to clear out this ghost that kept touching my friend and making a lot of noise and yelling at her to get out of her house. And so when we sat down and invited this ghost to chat with us, she was sure that we were ghosts, and we were sure that she was a ghost, until I started thinking that there might be something else. And this is when we discovered time traveling, so to speak. So we're in 2011, and the ghost is back in the late 1940s. So we started chatting with her. She kind of got over her, like, no, that can't be serious. And I'm saying, well, yeah, it's what it is. And Crystal Fallon was sitting with me as we were doing this. And, you know, because my intuition runs towards all four: seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing, I could see as we were chatting with her, I could see me and my friend and her, and I could also see Fallon sitting next to me like a gold light. So I asked Martha, I said, do you see the gold light that's next to me? And she said, yes. And I said, well, that's a crystal. And, you know, like they can mine in the mountains and so on. And I said, I think he's what's making it possible for us to chat with you. And that was kind of surprising her. But actually, in the years of working with Fallon, I've discovered that there are things that he can do very easily that we don't think about, like jumping time, like really facilitating my work as a medium with the dead, helping the stuck dead transition to the real afterlife. Fallon really facilitates that with his ancient healing abilities. So she could see Fallon's light, and I was like, okay, so this is part of who we are, and we're going to try to help her here. And I started wondering, like, why would I be able to talk to somebody in the past who seems now to be very much alive, just living in 1945 or 47, which is a long ways from 2011. And yet she could communicate with us and we could communicate with her. And I thought, well, why would I be able to do that? And then oops, I'm sorry. My cat just knocked something over in the closet. So I actually may have to hang up here to go rescue her. This is what happens in a live broadcast. Oh, here she comes. All right, sorry for the interruption. That's life with animals. So anyway, I was starting to wonder about how I could actually communicate with Martha and why her. And of course, part of the reason why is that we were trying to clear this house, this little cabin, 100-year-old cabin, of the energy of Martha, which we thought was a ghost who was a stuck dead person and unable to transition. So we were trying to get her out. And then it occurred to me, oh, I wonder if that has something to do with being able to talk with her. And so I had a feeling about what was happening. And I said, Martha, how old are you? And she said, 82. Okay, so that's old at any age, but certainly in the 1940s. And I thought, you know, how would she be able to more easily communicate with different things? And I thought, well, I could think of one thing. And I said, Martha, are you dying? And she said, yes. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's how I can communicate with her. I work with my dad, who helps the stuck dead move over, and that because this woman was so strongly connected to the house, somehow my friend, who was also strongly intuitive, was picking up on her energies in a different time period, and now this woman is dying. And it was, for me, it was a brief struggle of conscience, right? It was an opportunity to learn something about how we can just sit down and talk to somebody in a different time period, which is what we were doing. I could apply my analytical brain and ask a lot of questions to actually narrow down the time frame. Is it winter? Is it summer? When did the war with Germany end and the war with Japan end, and in the 1940s, and help us narrow down what's going on, even find out what life was like for her, what conditions were, why did she think we were ghosts, how long had she been seeing my friend in what she said was her house. So does time run differently in different time periods? My friend had been seeing her off and on for several years over the different time periods that she lived in the house, but how long had it been for the woman who said she was dying in the 1940s? And wow, wouldn't every scientist in the world want to be able to have that kind of conversation and start to verify things and start to experiment and find out how we could communicate? And I thought, yeah, I could pester a woman in her dying moments, or I could get her some help. And by this time, we knew that she was all alone. So I told her we would stay with her and be with her as she died. And I asked my dad if he could go be with her and help her as she died to transition to the afterlife. And there's also a bear and a deer that we work with, and it's another story for another time, how we met that bear and deer. But I promise you that even dead people are afraid of bears. So some woman dying in the mountains in California in the 40s would definitely have seen bears and had good reason to be wary of them. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I need help with this woman who's dying in California. And she's dying in California in the late 1940s. And Dad looks at me and he goes, okay, you've asked me to do a lot of strange things when we've been working together, but now you want me to time travel. And I go, like, Dad, you're a dead guy. You're already time traveling, aren't you? Like, hello? And he goes, oh, I guess, like that had suddenly occurred to him. And then he did this funny thing. He turned and he walked a few steps forward, took a few steps sideways and down, and then he was standing beside Martha in her house. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how he did that, but that was interesting. And she actually saw him and relaxed. And so I guess my dad was like a ghost appearing to Martha as she was dying in her physical body. And, she got real comfortable real fast with my friend and I talking to her, which we knew by now that she was a cook for the mines. But, what else was she? I mean, she seemed pretty comfortable with, demanding that ghosts get out of her house and then chatting with them. So you kind of wonder what kind of intuitive or witchcraft type activities, as we would call, as people would sometimes call them, she was familiar with. But again, there were a lot of things I wanted to ask and experiment with, but here was a person who was dying, and that was my first responsibility. So my friend and I told her that we were sorry that we would never meet her in real life, because clearly she was dying before we were even going to be born. But she was relaxing, and she said she wished that she could meet us, and that maybe after we died, we'd get to meet her. And we thought, yeah, we all have plenty of time to visit then, right? And I also told Martha what I was concerned about, and I said, my Crystal Fallon's here for a reason. He helps facilitate our connection with different beings in different places, and obviously here different time periods, but I'm worried about the house. It seems like you're in the house in my friend's time period, and you see her in your time period, And, we're all just learning how this stuff works. Time travel, I mean, it was a story. I didn't know it was real. I said, but it sounds like the connection between the two of you and the house is very strong. And so that makes me wonder if the house isn't vibrating between two different time periods. And if so, then it can't be healthy or safe. And we don't want the house collapsing on our friend right now in our time period. So after you die, we're going to shut down this connection so that there can be no further connection between this house and the past. I'm talking like I actually know what I'm saying and doing. But I figured I'd figure it out as we went along, which is how I do a lot of things that none of us are really knowing very much about. So, you hear about the sudden collapse of buildings every now and then, and you think, well, there's no good reason for that. It just suddenly collapsed. And right there now, I could see a very clear reason why a house would suddenly collapse. If it's vibrating between two time periods, how can the actual physical structure be completely secure? That stress of different time periods has to come out in some physical form. So I don't know. Well, that'll be something for the scientists to investigate. My concern was just to be there. So we told her we'd stay with her until she died, and then that my dad would help her go to the afterlife. And then after they did that, I would make sure that there was no further connection to the past with this house like that. And a few minutes later, Martha died, and she stood up from her bed, I guess, and walked with my dad, and they waved, and off they went to the afterlife. And that was almost the end of the story, because the next thing I did was, talk to Fallon and Jody, and we decided that Fallon needed to close the doorway between the two time periods. And he just did that. Gosh, crystals are really ancient souls. They're in that same body over millennia, which, we're only in a body for 100 years at most. So crystals don't forget what they learned over time or what they're capable of. And I just asked him to close the doorway between the time periods, and I watched as two big dark doors closed together, and there was this thin gold light between them. And then Fallon moved over, and Fallon's currently in the shape of a crystal ball. He started at the top of the light and just moved down to the bottom, and the doorway was sealed. That was it. It was done. And as far as I know, it stayed closed. My friend is no longer living there or even in that state. And I'm just assuming that the door stayed closed, that the time warp between the past and the present was over with, and our time traveling was over. So, it's just really interesting how much is really going on in the world out there that we don't think about or know about. And sharing these kinds of stories, I know you can have a couple of different impressions. One that is that I'm stark raving mad, and that's fine. I'm not. Sometimes I think that might be easier, but I'm not. I am sort of someone who's willing to experiment and willing to, I guess, what you call keep an open mind, and I'm curious, and I think that's why everything that I do in my intuitive life, including talking with the dead, is so different from what other people do, because we just kind of take the natural approach to working through things. And then I have Fallon, the crystal, to work with, and I have my dad in the afterlife and all of the beings that support him. And wow, so what about ghost stories? What about that? It's Halloween approaches in a few days, and I thought about this story and thought about sharing it, to let you think what you will about it. They talk about ghost stories, horror stories. My mom loved horror movies, and I couldn't even get through the opening credits of horror movies. And yet, my activity as a person who goes out and clears spaces of stuck energy, I see all kinds of things, and that's probably why I don't want to watch horror movies. Because I can see things that happen out there. And this was a fairly benign situation. This person was not evil. I started to suspect early on that we were talking across different time periods, and I don't know why that didn't completely astonish me. But I just believe that there's more going on out there than we know, and we're busy all day long, and some of us are going to investigate things and some of us aren't, and that's just life. But we hear ghost stories and we think they're stupid stories, and there's suspicious, naive minds that believe that kind of stuff. But, it's our religious and cultural institutions that over time have helped us, if you will, or forced us to shut down parts of us that were readily accessible to our ancestors, even if our ancestors are only a generation back and they're our parents. And facilitating past life regressions, I have seen people look at their souls 300, 400 years in the past, and that person, a simple farmer, a simple gardener, whatever they were doing, they just turn right around and talk to us like that's no problem. And I think they were just more in tune than we are. And I love science, but and I love electricity, and I love being able to go to the grocery store, and I love all kinds of things that science has offered. But we've been disconnected from what our ancestors used to know, and I think it's time for us to start tapping back into those things. So I hope telling this story intrigues you and makes you think about what possibly could be going on in the world around us and how we can live comfortably and safely, knowing that we could turn right around and talk to somebody in the past, or that they're little black guys coming out of holes and portals in the ground, all kinds of things. So we'll wrap up here after the commercial. Hang on.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Hi, this is recording artist and composer Yuval Ran, inviting you to a voyage through the chakras, a new double album of guided meditations to transform your life, a sublime musical medicine for nourishing inner peace and reaching to your higher virtues. Get it now at metamindfulnessmusic.com, METTA mindfulnessmusic.com.
911, what is your emergency?
My kid shot himself.
All right, where's the wounds?
911, what's your emergency?
Please, My son shot his brother.
911, what is your emergency? Okay. 911, please state your emergency.
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns.
It wasn't locked.
Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Welcome back to the Practical Intuitive Mind, Body, Spirit for the Real World. It's Robin Fritz, and we're talking about ghosts and things that are out there in the world. And so I think about Martha, this woman who died in the late 1940s. As my friend and I were chatting with her in 2011, we're thinking she's a ghost, she's thinking we're a ghost, and we discovered that somehow we'd managed to transcend time and chat with each other. And I know every scientist in the world would love to be able to figure out how to do that and if it works and whatever. And that's great. And I'm really not interested in the whole concept of like time being fluid. So all time is occurring right now, past, present, and future, because it's just not practical. And I'm a very practical person. And yeah, I have very different experiences. And I think that's a good thing. And I think it helps us to sit down and have conversations with others who are having similar or different experiences. And I think there's so much going on in the world that we need to start having these kinds of conversations with each other, with other people, to find out what everyone's experiencing. Yeah, some of us are going to be certifiable, possibly, but most of us aren't. We're just having experiences that our ancestors took for granted and that religion and culture and science have beat out of us over the past 200-300 years. And it's time for that to end, because we have disconnected ourselves from the rest of the planet. We think we're in charge, and we're not. We're part of a group of equal beings supporting a conscious living planet. And it doesn't matter what religion or culture or government thinks about. That's the reality. That's the reality I've been living in my entire life, and certainly since it became more present again to me 20 years ago. And in the case of things like this woman who's dying in California, all I know is at the end of her life, she wasn't alone. She was conversing with 2 women in the future, and that my dad was able to help her. And so she was able to die surrounded by people who were supporting her, even if they weren't there in her physical body. And in the last moments of her life, she let go of fear and became friends with 2 women in the future, and she let kindness and compassion help her. And we were open-minded and whatever it takes enough to be compassionate with her. So I know that ghosts are real. I meet them all the time in space clearings. I meet them when people have problems with their animals suddenly, and I was like, no, it's not a health issue. This is what's going on. But we decided what ghosts are without asking them. You know, sometimes they're dead humans. Sometimes in the case of Martha, they're dying humans. Sometimes they're not human at all. They're these little black guys who come out of portals in the ground, and I've dealt with them in more than one space clearing around the Seattle area. This is their planet too. We're just not aware of them because we don't see them in the dimension or whatever the physicality of their world is compared to ours. It's the same world. It's just we don't see it. And there are a lot of beings out there that we don't see that we can become aware of simply by being open to the connection. That's how I've met everything that I've met over the last 20-some years. That's how I learned that humans aren't in charge of the planet, but equals. And once we start living that, we become more relaxed and more open to what else is out there. I'm sorry I missed the opportunity to learn more about time travel, but I do know from my work out there that preconceptions keep us from experiencing the world and the universe as it really is. So we're afraid of ghosts, for example, and we hunt them on TV shows. And And the reality of that is much different. Now, I personally know people who are paranormal investigators. I know people who call themselves Ghostbusters. One of the social groups I belong to, they cheerfully call me their resident Ghostbuster. But I'm not. I'm not someone out there to hurt something. I'm out there to help what I find that's stuck in the space, to help it move on. And sometimes it's not stuck. Sometimes it's there on purpose. Sometimes they're just traveling through. My home is a place where multidimensional beings are welcome, as long as they don't scare my dog and my cat or create some sort of disturbance. And when that happens, then I have to deal with it. But it's a process of learning to live with other beings that are as conscious as we are, which all beings are, but to understand that and to realize you don't need vocal cords, you don't need a human body. Everything is sentient out there, and everything has a contribution to make to the world, regardless of the time frame that it's in. So when we're talking about the things that we find in the spaces, my problem with the people who are paranormal investigators is that they investigate, but they don't do anything about what they find. And that troubles me on a purely compassionate level. Because, yes, these are really amazing people. They're out there using their technology to try to record a conversation with a ghost or an entity that's in that space. And I've listened to some of those recordings, and I haven't been able to hear a thing on them. Maybe that's my preconception. But I know these are genuinely smart people. They're kind and they're compassionate. But what worries me and concerns me is that if you're having a conversation with a being that is there in that space, then my experience is that is stuck. Most likely a stuck dead person. And for some reason or other, they have not transitioned to the afterlife. And it is cruel to leave them there in that condition. And so if these people are out there investigating, then they need to take responsibility for what they find. And I haven't found any who are doing that. And that's what disturbs me. And I'd be happy to have this conversation with any paranormal investigator out there to see, how they justify what they're doing. And I think in one part it is that they don't believe that there's really a soul there, which is my experience. That stuck thing that is there is a soul. It may not have been attached to a human, but it's usually a soul. Now, there are other things. There are echoes. Some people believe that what's in a space is the echo of what was there before, kind of maybe even a time loop. That's possible, I suppose. It is not my experience. The other thing is they think, I don't know what they think. They think that it's just not real. And so they're just experimenting with what they're finding. And, over time, who knows what conclusions they come to, because I'm sure there's lots more out there in the world that I don't know about too. But my experience in going into a space and finding a ghost, so to speak, or something else in there is that is a stuck soul that needs help out. There are other things like these little black guys that come out of different portals that I had to learn about from non-humans. There are people who spend a lot of their time dealing with really ugly things as well as things that are just accidentally trapped. What I do know is our ancients, for example, Halloween is coming up. Well, Halloween is another co-opted celebration day, if you will, that came from people that we now call pagans. Celtic tradition, the first day of the Celtic New Year, and over time a way to connect with their dead. What we should all understand is that our ancient ancestors created places where they honored and celebrated the deities in their tradition. And I know I didn't believe in those deities until I met some of them. So I know that my experience is limited too. But they would collect, they would make offerings at these sites. They became holy sites. They were often where ley lines converged, and ley lines are real. They're like the veins and arteries of the human body. They're flowing through, and they can gather in certain spots, and those spots became sacred places where we could connect with different beings, deities, if you will, certainly different beings from different time periods or even different planets, and that those places were co-opted by religions that built churches on top of them, because how else do you get rid of the previous influence but to build on top of it so you can't see it for what it used to be. So maybe at some point in our history we'll get past the point where we have to dominate and persecute what came before us, and simply become acquainted with what's there and has been there, and as a result develop more reverence for not just the human experience, but for the experience of all beings on the planet, whether they're a tree, a blade of grass, the Preseli bluestone that is a foundation stone of Stonehenge, whatever it is, that we go out and realize that we're not alone, that we learn to share. Now, if you're having difficulties on your property, and I know people will call the ghost paranormal investigators, whatever, I just haven't heard of them actually clearing the space. At some point, you'll need to clear the space if you're having issues, including just leaving the space, giving it up to somebody else, the beings that live there. But usually you can go in. Homes are created to nurture and support us. That's their sole purpose. That's why they came in to be, that soul came to be part of that house, to have that experience. And so they're very protective, and they're very aware of other things that are in them. So if you're going to buy new property, if you're remodeling, if you have friends that are feeling uncomfortable in their space, they're hearing noises, and little kids, they hear a lot. You know, I get a lot of calls from parents with highly intuitive children. And what are they getting from those spaces? Well, it's not necessarily the spaces. It's, you know, the dead from previous, the dead period, just becoming aware that these little people can actually hear them. Looking for help, the dead looking for help. So if there's something stuck in your space, invite it to move on. Put salt out. You can choose an incense. If I've got a really stuck space, I'll go for the high-powered stuff like copal, C-O-P-A-L, or frankincense. Some sort of incense that just alerts the beings there that, hey, you know, something's got to change here. And work with them. Help them out like we helped Martha. Find out what they're there for. If you can't communicate with them, which, you know, most of us, we've got busy day jobs and you don't do this for a living, just tell them it's time for them to go. This is your space. Consecrate that space for you. Put salt around. Sea salt is a traditional clearing device. You can use anything, rock salt, I suppose. Border your property with it. Consecrate it to your family, and make it an opportunity for you to learn about, and your family to learn about what happened there in the past, what kinds of beings lived on the wild spaces before we developed cities over them. Nature is not a one-person deal. It's involving multiple beings in multiple places. This is why I like to take a group to Yellowstone National Park every June to experience the really unsettled developing energies of a very active physical environment, which of course the earthquakes and just the activity at Yellowstone helps us understand how alive our planet really is and how connected we can be to the different energies that go through our wild spaces, but they can be the wild spaces in your neighborhood. The first non-humans that I talked to in the neighborhood, I called the Guardians of Alki, which is the beach district where I live in Seattle, and they turned out to be what people traditionally call fairies. They were just looking out for the land. So as you go about your day and you notice things that are going on, remember the story of Martha, that, it was, how did we connect? That she didn't want people in her space, but she was connected to that space and we helped her. And when you're dealing with something unusual in your space, offer compassion, offer kindness, offer help for that to move on, clear your space with salt, and share your story with other people. The more we share, the more we learn. And as we end today, I want to thank you for joining us. You can find me at my website, robinfritz.com, ROBYNFRITZ.com. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get a free guided meditation, a video meditation with Crystal Fallon. You can also find me for my services, personal and business intuition, mediumship, animal communication, clearly space clearing, past life and between life regression, soul progression clearing, energy healing, all there to support you to be the best intuitive and healer that you can be. Next week, in the coming weeks, we're going to have a lot of guests on our show. Some of them scientists. We'll have a lot of fun talking about different subjects with them. So join us again, and thank you for being here today. Take care.